Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Reier on YouTube channel. I am Chase Goodbread, the sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, along, of course, with Travis Reier, owner and operator of the aforementioned Reier on YouTube channel. You got to check it out. Lots of super content there. Give it a like. Give it a subscribe. It's Reier on YouTube. Talkin Tide, wrapping up A-Day here in this edition. Touch on basketball again just a little bit before we get out of here. Of course, the basketball transfer portal closes, I believe, the 22nd of this month, and then the football portal will close 3 days later. So plenty of portal activity going on right now, but A-Day activity in the spotlight, certainly, Travis, on Saturday, and in some ways, maybe a spotlight Alabama didn't like because there weren't a lot of people there. I think you and I both.
Well, they got those rabble-rousers like yourself out there doing that man on the street.
Yeah. Well,
causing problems for the program.
I did man in the bleachers, and the man in the bleachers was none too pleased, Travis. None too pleased.
Oh, Mib, man in bleachers.
Ran into a couple of them that hadn't even heard it wouldn't be a game.
Oh, geez.
You know, one of them drove from Huntsville, hadn't heard. One of them drove from Tallahassee.
Well, now look, we pretty much knew, and I know you alluded to this in the column too, right? I mean, it was no secret, really, that this wasn't going to be a game. I mean, we talked about it last week here on Talkin Tide. There wasn't going to be any stakes and, beanie weenies and all that. Although I see where Tim Keenan, it looked like, still took the defensive line out for stakes. So good for those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Those guys need to eat, no doubt about it. But, you and I were definitely high on our attendance guesses. I think 15 is generous. I think it might have been 10 or 11 is probably more like it. It's what it looked like to me anyway. There wasn't a soul anywhere in the upper bowl, obviously, and in the lower bowl it was really just kind of a smattering on both sides and a few in the end zone.
You were there. Myself, like a lot of people, was not. It kind of sounded like a fan day during fall camp is kind of what it sounded like, or what it kind of looked like from what I could see.
That's precisely what it was, right down to the autograph session at the end.
Yeah, running of the fans.
For Yay Alabama members only.
At
$18 a month. But
got to get those funds up. Got to get those funds up.
Ryan Williams, you want to get the funds up, have a game, right? Maybe you get more signups, right? That's
how about this? I was thinking about this too, Goodbread. How about you do an in-house stream of the game that benefits Yay Alabama? You know what I mean? Like, since it wasn't televised, offer it for like a pay-per-view type thing.
Yeah.
With those funds going to Yay Alabama.
Right.
Maybe you can do that to raise.
Members get the link. Members get this, get the secret code. You get the stream.
$19.95, and for a year you get the Yay Alabama access or something. And the stream. I don't know.
Yeah, that's at least a way to get the credit card number on file, Travis. That's what it's all about. It's just getting that card number on file.
And you make that cancellation real hard, The boys they call in for that cancellation. They can't get the cancellation to work.
Yeah,
we've worked for some websites that maybe were hard to cancel back in the day. Goodbread.
Yes, no question. Yeah, but much more broadly than just Yay Alabama. Some of these online subscriptions, Travis, you can dig all around that website for that cancellation info. And
some of these websites some of these websites are like Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave.
They bury that cancel info like the golden Easter egg.
Yeah. It's hard to get somebody on those numbers.
But at any rate, not a whole lot of people showed up, obviously, and understandably so, given what the kind of show that's usually put on A-Day. It was a 90-minute workout. There were, I believe, 3 total periods that featured 11 on 11. But even in that, they weren't tackling live.
We talked about that
So,
last week. Totally didn't expect anybody to be going to the ground, and
no,
from what I could see, it really wasn't even thud.
right.
It's one thing to not go to the ground, but typically you'll at least see thud. This
Hmm.
was kind of like Pro Bowl rules
Yeah.
before the Pro Bowl just went to pretty much flag football.
You know what? I asked Kane Womack about Jeremiah Beeman earlier today in his press conference. Maybe I should have asked him how much live tackling they did all spring. The answer
Well,
might be not as much as in the past, shall we say, right?
well, you might get a better answer in the fall.
Yeah.
When look, you've got plenty of time in fall camp, and in fall camp, you got to do some tackling. Right now, maybe not as much. But something else we talked about is more than ever, you got to protect your guys in the spring because 10, 15 years ago, you knew you were going to have some second and third year guys as your depth providers behind your
Right.
frontline guys. Now, all your second and third year guys could be going somewhere else.
Hmm.
So you got to take care of your guys, and it stinks. It stinks for the fans. A lot of this rhetoric too about why there aren't spring games is a bunch of horse crap, in my opinion. I mean, worried about poaching. Like, no, like these teams don't know each other's rosters. All they do for about 2 or 3 years is recruit these kids. They're evaluating these kids pretty much as ninth graders now. Everybody knows what you've got. The people who shouldn't be playing spring games, if we want to be honest, in fear of poaching, are the Louisiana Lafayette's who lost a running back to Alabama, or the Ball States, or these teams that are losing starters to the Power Fours, the Power Fives. That's the teams that shouldn't be playing spring games because that's where you can really find those type of players. At this level in the SEC and the Big Ten, these teams all know what they've got. They know what each other have from a personnel perspective. So spare me, save me the poaching side of this. Now, if you're just wanting to keep guys healthy, you're trying to protect your guys from a health perspective, I can buy that a little more so.
Yeah. Yeah. I posed the same opinion on the Bird app earlier today. I don't buy the Matt Rule reasoning. I don't necessarily. I can buy the injury
Yeah.
excuse more than the poaching excuse.
Who got poached today? Who got poached today? South Alabama got poached. South
Mm-hmm.
Alabama starting quarterback is now going to be the starting quarterback for Bill Belichick at North Carolina. It wasn't Alabama that got poached today or Tennessee that got poached today.
Right.
It was South Alabama. Back to my point of I'd be more worried if I were Ball State or Louisiana Lafayette about the poaching side of this thing right after spring practice.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of North Carolina and speaking of transfer quarterbacks, do they get Nico over in
Yeah.
Chapel Hill? Does it
It's not
happen
going to
or not?
be the University of Nico, Carolina. It doesn't
Uh-uh.
look like. They took the transfer from South Al today. Look, I mean, if
Yeah.
Nico and his peeps are out there pushing 4 million, I just don't see that happening, man. And what we've got now are quarterbacks that have come in his wake. Juju Lewis, he asked Southern California for $2 million in this
Mm-hmm.
last cycle. And that was never going to happen at USC. And that's why he's at Colorado.
Yeah.
Lincoln Riley isn't going to give a freshman quarterback $2 million. So there's been a lot of this rah, good for Tennessee sentiment. Good for Josh Heupel for standing up. Well, Tennessee kind of started all this by
Yeah.
giving Nico 2 million or 2 million plus to start with.
Right.
So save me
Yeah.
some of that where Big Orange is concerned too.
Alabama quarterbacks, Travis. Ryan Grubb, his news conference today, said what we kind of knew, said what you and I have alluded to here lately on the podcast. He's the de facto number one quarterback. Competition still ongoing per the coaching staff, but they came out of spring with Simpson on top. No surprise there.
No, it kind of sounded like it was moving that way. And it's still interesting, to hear Grubb kind of just come right out and say it. And we talked about this last week. You're also thinking about the bigger picture in August and beyond and knowing how your season starts out. how it sets up. And with this schedule, there's been schedules in the past where you knew your first 2 or 3 games, if you did decide to go with the least experienced, maybe of a 2 or 3 player race, you could kind of ease into the deep end a little bit. I think Florida State being right there at the top of the schedule and on the road has to play into that. But even with all of that, Ty Simpson, when he's been given the opportunity, has done some really good things. Keelan Russell's going to be a really good quarterback. I don't think anybody doubts that. But look, DJ Lagway last year going into Florida, he ended up being the guy later in the season, but it was Graham Mertz that was clearly the guy going into last season for the Florida Gators. And I think there's a little bit of that dynamic here. I think Ty Simpson is that, that type of veteran that can kind of keep things stabilized. And there's plenty around Ty Simpson that should allow him to be effective.
Hang on to the football, number one.
Yeah.
I think you made a great point before A-Day. The quick game will be big for Ty Simpson, too. Get some of those easy first downs, take what the
with
defense
those wide
gives
receivers,
you, et cetera. And then, at that and then anything else you want out of your quarterback, you better get out of your offensive line, too, from a pass protection standpoint. I'm writing about that for tomorrow. But anytime you got a first-year starter at quarterback, if you struggle in pass protection, it is a bad mix.
You do. But I'm leaning optimistically towards this offensive line, and I've yelled from the mountaintops this offseason to this point. Everybody's talking quarterback. I need to see more from this offensive line. I'm feeling better about it. I'm kind of thinking Wilkin Formby in that tackle situation, feeling better about it. I'm interested to see if Olas Alinen, as much as he was needed at tackle this spring because of Caden Proctor being out and some holes they were trying to fill, could he end up being the guy as the other guard there? Is it Gino Vandemark at the other guard opposite Jaden Roberts? So I'm feeling a tad more optimistic, Goodbread, about that offensive line. But that's still the area on offense I wonder about more than even quarterback still to this point.
It certainly sounded today from listening to the coaching staff like Allen, they kind of see as their Alfred McCullough, their sixth, the swing guy. Both tackles, play him inside too. If you need to play him inside, he looks like the glue kind of coming off the bench at that offensive line, spot. A lot of praise for the two highly touted freshmen, Michael Carroll, Jackson Lloyd. Jackson Lloyd, DeBoer said today, is a little bit more of a pure offensive tackle, whereas I think with Carroll, they see a little bit more swing value. But, if things don't go well at right tackle for Formby, maybe Allen is a guy that they plug in there. Maybe it's one of these young guys. We'll see.
Yeah, I like the young OL like everybody else does. I think Jackson is exactly that. If Caden Proctor has the year he could have, maybe he moves on to the National Football League, and you've got your successor there at left tackle. But there's still some things to be proven, even at tackle, and really that guard spot opposite Jaden Roberts. So take care of business well enough there. Wide receiver looks like it's been upgraded in a lot of ways with Isaiah Horton coming in there and some of the fresh blood in general that they've been able to add, and also getting a couple of guys back from injury. Running back, obviously you expect Jam Miller to be the guy or one of those top two guys there. It sounds like Richard Young showed some good things during the course of the spring. And, AK Deer may be a year away. As dynamic as he is, there's more to it than just that. So there are the pieces on offense with Ryan Grubb now in that main play caller role to certainly elevate that offense. And as we talked about last week, and you mentioned tonight, I still think the quick game being a more legitimate part of this offense in 2025 is going to be a big help.
Yeah, speaking of the running back position, Grubb also with some praise for Daniel Hill earlier today. He's a big guy who could, maybe deliver some power between the tackles for Alabama if he's able to carve out some kind of a role. A lot of running backs to look at for him for sure. Wide receiver ought to be up. I really think Isaiah Horton is purely an outside guy, but for that reason, guys like Ryan Williams maybe can drop inside a little bit more, play some of that slot receiver role. Obviously, I think Jeremy Bernard's a versatile guy who can move around. They love Lotzer Brooks, the freshman who's been playing in the slot. Cole Adams, obviously, coming back. So plenty of options, Travis. We'll see who delivers.
I think they've got two X's. One from kind of the retro descriptive of the wide receiver position. I think Isaiah Horton can be an X on the outside, right? And I think Ryan Williams can be an X factor. He can be an X. He can be a Z, Y. I think Jeremy Bernard is more of that Z type, or what our grandfathers used to call a flanker.
Right.
That kind of guy. But yeah, I mean, they're set up nicely, with the skill pieces, especially at wide receiver.
Elsewhere, obviously tight end, bad shape there, injury wise. Jay Lindsey, the lone scholarship guy, come fall, and we'll see if Alabama decides to maybe pick up a tight end in the portal. That would not shock me. But they picked up one or two tight ends in the portal in the fall. They're just lesser known guys from smaller schools. But, with Danny Lewis coming back, Marshall Pritchett going to be back. Obviously, Josh Cuevas is your tight end one. He missed the last week or so of spring practice. He gets back, and then you drop Caleb Edwards into the mix as an incoming freshman who hasn't quite enrolled. I believe he'll come in June.
Yeah.
Maybe they feel good enough, at least numbers-wise. Unless
they have a portal departure or two, I still think numbers-wise they should be okay.
Yeah.
In part because, as we've talked about, I don't know if they're as 12 heavy this year as they were last year with Dupree and Oots and Cuevas. Maybe they're more 11, with those wide receivers.
Yeah.
3 wide receiver sets, which when you think about Kalen and Grubb and that last year at UW, wasn't that largely what they were with those wide receivers?
I watched a whole lot of Washington football from that year, 2023, when Grubb was running that show. I saw a lot of 12. I saw a lot of two tights, but they were a ton of motion, a lot of flex guys.
Yeah.
It was pretty heavy 12, and Cuevas was actually in that mix a little bit. But just because they ran a lot of 12 that year, that you're right. I mean, if you want the best 11 on the field, that may mean 3 wideouts.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be fascinating to watch. And regardless, I think in terms of numbers, again, barring multiple departures via the transfer portal from the current roster, I would think they could be okay. Now, injuries can change things quick. Just look at what we saw. Some of that may, though, have even been, like we talked about earlier, just trying to protect some guys that you could push if you wanted to in the spring, but didn't want to do that as much.
Defensive side of the ball, Travis, I thought Dijon Lee looked pretty good out there on Saturday. Of course, most of my time was occupied chatting with disgruntled fans who were not hard to find. But I did manage to throw my eyes on the field long enough to catch Dijon Lee for a few reps that I thought were pretty impressive. I think there's a lot of excitement about him with the coaching staff coming in and making an impact at the cornerback position pretty quickly.
Give me those 5 DBs if they played today. I want Chase Goodbread's 5 DBs. I mean, think about it, because Damani Jackson wasn't out there. So Damani Jackson, Xavier Brown, that's the corners, isn't it?
You would think so. Obviously, Sav is going to be back and healthy. He'll be at a safety spot, you would expect.
Yeah.
I think Bray Hubbard's going to earn a starting role in that secondary.
And Deion Sabb. That's your
And
two
then
safeties.
at your Husky, is it Deshaun Jones?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go with Jones.
Yeah.
So, I mean, depth, I guess, is the bigger point. If you got Dijon Lee, who is apparently kind of impressing people already in a way that Xavier Brown did a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then you still got Cam Calhoun that you brought in.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good sounding, good looking secondary right now. You got Zay Mincy, perhaps, as a depth provider at safety. Now, I say all this, and we'll see about the portal, but the depth looks good today on April the 14th.
We'll see about the portal.
Yeah.
To me, cornerback is one of those positions, along with running back, and maybe a couple others, where you just can't have enough good ones.
No,
because you are inevitably going to find yourself in a pickle in November if you come up short on the second team. At corner, you get somebody hurt, you throw somebody in there that's not good enough, and they get picked on. The book goes around the SEC. Now all of a sudden, you got quarterbacks just looking that guy up for picking on them. And then running back, obviously, is for different reasons. Running back, you can't have enough of those, more for injury attrition.
You got Dre Kirkpatrick Jr. We haven't even really talked about that can help you out back there. Hey, let me ask you, because this kind of ties in with some movement we saw at the end of last season and going into this offseason. Jalen Mbakwe going from corner to wide receiver. Is he at this point, you think, set up to be a big part of this offense after making that switch? Goodbread?
It was a quiet spring for Mbakwe. Didn't hear his name a lot from players. Didn't hear his name a lot from the staff either. That doesn't mean he didn't have a good spring. But I criticized, I lightly criticized the move to wide receiver just from a team standpoint when it happened back in December. To me, corners are just so much more valuable. And I saw a lot of upside in Mbakwe at the corner spot. I thought they would have been better off leaving him there. And who knows whether or not
is Gelato here in the comments talking about Mbakwe? Bama let a DB wideout take the team hostage.
Yeah, well, who else could he be referring to? To whom?
What flavor of gelato is that? Spicy gelato.
Yeah. But
it's only one I know, but yeah.
The word was that he didn't make a wide receiver demand when he hit the portal. Obviously, the timing of that was a little questionable. Regardless, I think from a team standpoint, they would have been better off leaving him at corner. Now, that was before they went out and got Cam Calhoun, I believe, right? I mean,
I think they're okay now.
But we'll see if he's able to. We'll see if he's able to break through and make a big impact at that wide receiver spot. But it won't be easy.
The thing with him too, though, is the return game. He can still, regardless of positionally where he calls home, he's still got that potential too. But I'm not ready to go BJ Scott. You remember BJ Scott came in from Mobile, and look, Burton Scott deserves a lot of credit. He helped switch that momentum in Mobile. Everybody talks about Julio coming from Foley to Alabama and how that really turned the tide, so to speak, down there. Mark Barron that followed, and a lot of those guys. But my recollection is it was actually Burton Scott. BJ Scott was a highly coveted guy from down there, and he's the one who first made that move and really seemed to help. And it didn't turn out to be a great career. And I'm not going there with Mbakwe yet, but he was that kind of guy too. He was a two-way phenom. And it just seemed like it was hard for him to find a position at the SEC level before.
Kevin Thomas, Talkin Tide most definitely is, but Talkin Tide never left.
Where are you, Kevin? Where you been?
Yeah,
KT?
Talkin Tide has been known to take a temporary hiatus or two.
Talkin Tide can go on a bender every once in a while. You don't see him for a few weeks. Yeah.
but it never
And
goes away
Kevin
altogether.
Thomas says Southern Fried Sports is next. He says, I don't know. That one's in cold storage. SFS is in cold storage. But that doesn't mean we couldn't wheel it back out,
Yeah.
KT.
Thaw it out. Thaw it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, absolutely.
Reier on YouTube channel, of course, hosts the Talkin Tide podcast. Jump on YouTube, search for Reier on YouTube, give it a like and a subscribe. Travis has got a whole bunch of really good content there.
25 minutes in, Goodbread. Where else are you going to get this kind of Bama discussion? When we take you back to Burton Scott, we start talking about cancellation being like the Hotel California.
Right.
Well, Gelato chiming in with players taking the team by hostage. I mean, yeah, go find that somewhere else. All right.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. How about a little basketball before we get out of here, Travis, real quickly? Darian Reed and Jaron Stevenson, I believe since we last potted, have decided to file their exit papers as well, headed to the transfer portal. I believe Jaron Stevenson is headed home to play for the Heels. He is a Pittsboro, North Carolina native, which, of course, is right outside of Chapel Hill. And looks like he's headed back to UNC, not back to UNC, but back home to play for his hometown school.
Yeah, and when that move happened, I guess he had the do not contact tag. I mean, you kind of went straight to UNC. I mean, the ties there, obviously, multiple ties. So, hey, look, Jaron Stevenson, 2 years at Alabama, had some big moments in that 2024 tournament run.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this before. He's got to continue to get stronger, whether it's as a rebounder, whether it's with the ball in his hands. And so that's the hope. And look, I think a lot of folks thought Jaron Stevenson coming out of high school, even as a reclassifier, because he did reclassify, still 19 years old, I think,
Young
something
guy,
like
yeah.
that. He was going to be maybe a one and out. I think he's a 4-year player at this point. I think he's going to be a 4-year guy. And look, in today's NIL world, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, as I'm sure he's finding out right now and going to North Carolina. So, hey, hopefully it works out for Jaron. I guess the thing I wouldn't have thought was that between the three, Chase, between Mo, between Reed, and between Stevenson, all three would go.
Right.
You know what I mean? I figured one of those three would be back for 2025, 2026. Not sure about you.
Yeah, I agree. Diabate leaving, obviously the biggest blow of those three. Although I see NBA potential in Darian Reed. I think there's a lot of upside there. He could be a better player than Diabate next year, potentially.
Can't make the club from the tub, though.
No,
I mean, you got to be on the floor. So
you got to be on the floor. He had a lot of injury problems that limited him during conference play. Obviously, he got back a little bit in time to play in the postseason. But Reed's a guy that I think Nate Oates was definitely looking forward to developing, and definitely saw him as somebody that would be a nice fit into what they're doing. As I mentioned, top of the show, I think the transfer portal for basketball is open for like another 8 days or so. So maybe Nate makes a move before that thing closes. Of course,
I'd be surprised if he didn't. At this point.
Yeah.
I mean, how many guys does he have rostered right now for next year? I should probably take a look at that. But Kevin Thomas with a interesting point here. Our guy KT. What a time to be a basketball fan for Alabama. Lose 2 guys to the portal that go to UNC and Kentucky. Yeah,
imagine that.
That's a little different. Yeah, used to be you take, if you're Alabama, you think, well, we'll take the 8th or 9th guy,
right,
from UNC or Kentucky. But these are guys that are going to Kentucky and Carolina to start. You would think, right?
Or at least make starter money.
They're it sounds like Mo, he's not getting 6-man money. It doesn't sound like.
Nah, I don't think so either.
In Lexington. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how this roster continues to evolve. I mean, it just kind of accentuates some things, because we haven't even talked about LeBaron Philon going all in now with the
Yeah.
NBA draft. So don't you need someone else that can play on the basketball? I mean, what do you got right now? You got Aiden Holloway and Reitzel, I guess.
Reitzel.
But
Reitzel.
is he really a true on the ball guy?
And we talked about that.
I think you need another guy that can really play on the basketball legitimately. I don't know about you.
No, for sure. Reitzel and Holloway both have that swing guard feel to them, more so than a guy that's going to handle your penetration, lead you in assists, hold the turnovers down, make the right decision at the rim. I mean, those are all things, obviously, that were kind of right up Mark Sears' alley. And when they're up Mark Sears' alley, and he's playing 35 minutes a game, they can't be up anybody else's alley,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's still, to me, there's still some work to be done. I don't doubt that Nate will get it done. I mean, we got plenty of a sample size at this point to suggest he's more than going to get that done, but still some blanks to be to be filled in for this team.
All the blanks, however, have been filled in here on this edition of Talkin Tide.
One more though, Goodbread, I think we need to hit before we get out of here. Bill Oliver passed away today.
Yes.
The
R.I.P.
Yeah, the great, really an all-timer where Alabama football is concerned. I don't go back as far as to say playing days and things like that, but for us, in terms of, our college years, especially, Brother Bill and that defense, that 92 defense, and the work he did with that. And I know you do a lot of stuff with Cope, and I would love to hear his thoughts on it. But Brother Bill Oliver, especially where secondaries were concerned, that was about the only guy that back then seemed like he had something for Steve Spurrier from time to time. And even he took some lumps from Spurrier.
He
But
took a 1991 lump in Gainesville pretty good.
Yeah, he did. And that was as much on the offense. The offense was so bad in early 91. I was at that game at Florida Field, and it was terrible. The offense was as much to do with that blowout as anything. But yeah, the 93 Sugar Bowl and that masterful performance against Gino Torretta and the Miami Hurricanes. It was an absolute all-timer. I know some folks weren't happy. He ends up at Auburn coaching with Terre, but all in all, just a mastermind, a guy that was immensely respected. And thoughts and prayers go out to his family.
Passes away at 85 years old, originally, I believe, from Epes, Alabama, if I'm pronouncing that right. It's over on the western border near that Mississippi line. And he was a part of 5 national championships, 1 as a player, 4 as a coach, 3 as an assistant coach under Bryant, and then, of course, really well known, as you said, for the work he did on that 92 team, and in particular, the way he orchestrated a phenomenal defensive game plan against Miami in that Sugar Bowl. Also,
go ahead.
The 61 team that he played for and won a national championship on, I believe that was the team that only gave up like 20-something points the whole season. So he played for one of the greatest defenses in Alabama history and coached one of the greatest defenses in Alabama history.
Yeah, just an all-time great brother.
No question about it. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast on the Reier on YouTube channel. For Travis Reier, I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News. We will talk to you next time right here on Talkin Tide.